Curse of the Kichai Shaman. Chapter 14. Nolan Investigations. Helene was up early Wednesday morning. At 8:05 a.m., she called Nolan Private Investigators. Catherine Nolan answered the phone. Helene and Catherine talked for about 20 minutes. Catherine told Helene that she had been an FBI agent in Los Angeles for 20 years and had retired 8 years ago and opened her firm. She said that most of her investigators were women and that they all were former police detectives, and many were also former military. She said that her investigators cost $125 an hour and that there was an 8-hour minimum payment due up front. She said that she also charged 1 hour at $200 for her to personally review the case. She said that for a $1,200 payment up front, they could begin the case that day, and it rarely took them more than 1 day to resolve an investigation. Helene asked if she could take a Visa debit card. She said yes, and Helene gave the card information over the phone. The payment went through, and Catherine told her that an agent named Susan Waters would be on her case. She said she was one of her best investigators. She asked if Helene could stay on the line, and she would see if she was available now. The line went quiet for about a minute. Then Catherine came back on and introduced Helene to Susan. Once Catherine had made the introduction, she hung up her phone and let Helene and Susan talk. Susan started by telling Helene about herself. She was a former police detective in Dallas who left the department 5 years ago and began working for Catherine. She said she did not want to badmouth the Dallas Police Department, but that she was taken more seriously working for Catherine. She then asked, "How can I help?" Helene told her that her husband thought that a man named Richard Nergal from Norman, Oklahoma was trying to kill him. She told her that he tried putting ether on his truck's air conditioner intakes and had put Rohypnol in his drink twice. She told her about the black car chasing her husband and shooting at him and how he had located it by putting an air tag on Richard's car, and that the police raided that house and freed 3 women, killed 1 suspect, and that Richard and another man had fled. Then she told her about the man in black watching her house on Monday before leaving in a black sports utility vehicle and showing up at Washington on the Brazos where her husband worked on Tuesday. Helene got Susan's email address and sent her the photos of the man both at her house and at her husband's work. She then asked for David's phone number so she could call him and get his side of the story. Helene freely gave her the number. After they ended the call, Helene texted David that Susan Waters from Nolan Investigations would call him. David was digging in his unit at the Hatfields Exchange site when he got the text. When his phone rang a few minutes later, he answered it. Susan introduced herself and asked if he had time to talk. He said he did, and he told her the same things that Helene had told her, but he provided addresses, license plate numbers, the kidnapping victims' names, the names of the Carrico brothers, and numbers to police detectives that had worked on the case that he had stored in his notes on his phone. Susan told David that she was on the case and that she would probably have a report ready on Friday. David told her he was driving home Friday after work for the weekend, and that would be great. Susan clocked in on David and Helene's case that Wednesday on October the 4th at 9 a.m. that morning. She had access to a myriad of databases that Nolan Investigations subscribed to. The first thing she did was check out Richard Nergal of Norman, Oklahoma. She found that he did not have any social media accounts under that name. There were no arrest records for him under that name either. She then just Googled Nergal and found out Nergal was an Assyrian god of the dead. She then checked Richard Nergal in a database of name changes and found that his real name was Richard Smithland, that he had changed it in 1998. Susan went to a real estate database and searched for Richard Nergal and found he bought a home at 103 East Acres Street in Norman, Oklahoma. He paid cash and disclosed bank records that showed he had over $52 million in the account he disclosed. It said the money was from a trust fund set up by his grandfather. She researched the grandfather and found out he was a 4th-generation family member on the board of directors at the billion-dollar company Smithland Industries. She researched an ancestry site and found that the grandfather had 1 son. She found the grandfather had a younger brother that had 1 daughter. The grandfather's brother was on the board of directors at Smithland Industries also. The grandfather's son had 1 son who was Richard, and the grandfather's brother's daughter had no children. Her name was Diane, and she had married and been divorced, but kept the name Diane Hayward Smithland. Richard's grandfather and the grandfather's brother were the last family members to sit on the board of directors at Smithland Industries. Diane Hayward Smithland was Richard's closest relative. Susan then looked in the extensive real estate database and found that Diane had purchased a home on 113 Laurel Lane in Sausalito, California, and that she paid cash, and the money used came from a trust fund set up by her father, and in 1996 her account had over $106 million in it. Susan switched back to investigating Richard some more. David had told her that he was an archaeologist, so she started looking in a database of college graduates. She checked 26 universities in Oklahoma and came up blank. There were no records of Richard Smithland or Richard Nergal ever graduating college there. Susan then started looking at universities near Richard's aunt in the Bay Area of California. She looked up graduates of Stanford and came up blank. But when she looked up University of California, Berkeley, she found that he had graduated in 2002 with a Bachelor of Arts in Anthropology. She then checked a database for California and found that Richard had listed his address as being at 113 Laurel Lane in Sausalito, California in 1998. This was the same address as his aunt 2 years after she had first bought the house. Susan had been researching for 4 hours of the 8 hours she was going to spend on this case. She decided to take a break for lunch. She knew that Catherine, her boss, would get busy and forget to take lunch, so she popped into her office and asked her if she had eaten. She had not, so they decided to go to lunch together. Susan took a folder with the information she had found with her. They went to a Mexican restaurant called Con Todo. While they were eating, Catherine asked her how it was going on the case. She told her that she found a place that the primary person of the investigation might have gone to. Susan told Catherine about Richard's aunt and that he lived there at the turn of the century. Susan said that when she got back, she was going to try and find out who the man in the photos that the clients had sent was. Catherine asked if she had the photos with her, and she showed them to her. In the photo taken in Austin out the window of the guest house, the man was rather far away, but the photo taken as a video capture of the man outside David's truck was clear. Catherine looked at the photo and said that the man looked familiar to her. She told Susan to run the photo through the facial recognition database of law enforcement personnel when she got back. When Susan got back and had clocked in on the case, she did exactly what Catherine had told her to do. She put the video capture photo into editing software and cropped out the man's face. She then got on a special computer terminal and ran the cropped photo through the database of photos of nationwide law enforcement personnel. It began searching. This could take a while, so she went back to her desk and continued investigating other avenues. Susan called the Anadarko Police Department and asked to speak to Detective Hayes. The duty officer said that Detective Hayes was out on a homicide investigation, but that Detective Moody had come in early to cover for him. She asked to speak to him. Detective Moody got on the phone, and Susan asked him about David Madure and the shooting that took place. He told her he remembered David had come in and filed a report about an alleged poisoning. He said a man put chemicals on his truck's air conditioner intakes. Detective Moody said there was a video of the assault, and that a day or so later, David was the victim of an attempted shooting, but that no officers saw the incident, but that David had a video from that also. He said that that was all he could say, but that if she submitted a Freedom of Information request, he would email her all the reports and the videos. Susan filled out a standard Freedom of Information request and faxed it to the number Detective Moody had given her. Then she called the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office and asked to speak to Detective Elm. Detective Elm got on the phone, and she asked for information about the 3 hostages that were rescued from 309 Duffy Road. She said she might have information that was pertinent to that case. He said that there were things he could not talk about because the investigation was ongoing, but that he could let her talk to Deputy Limkeen, who was at the house involved, and he could tell her the information that was already released on the case. She said that that would be fine, and he connected her to Deputy Limkeen's desk phone. Deputy Limkeen told her that the information he could share was already released to the press and that he could email her the press release. She gave him her email address and told him that Richard Nergal had lived at 113 Laurel Lane in Sausalito, California, when he went to college at the University of California, Berkeley, and that his aunt still lived there. He took down the information and they ended the call. Susan then went and checked on the computer terminal that was doing the facial recognition search. There was a match. It came back to an FBI agent that was stationed in Los Angeles named Mike Eichhorst. Susan searched the real estate database to see if he had purchased a home and came up empty. She then checked the database for name changes and found that Mike Eichhorst had changed his name to Venator Aquilex in 1998. This was the same year Richard changed his name to Nergal. She ran the name Venator Aquilex through the real estate database and found that he had bought a home in Montana at 110 Bras Road in the town of Lone Pine in 1998, and he had paid cash and had $550,000 in his account at the time. It was 4 p.m. and Susan stopped for the day. She would spend 2 more hours in the morning on this case and then submit it to Catherine, who would go over everything for an hour before submitting the report to Helene and David. The next morning was Thursday, and Susan came in early and got to clock in on the case at 7 a.m. She checked her email and saw an email from Detective Moody that had come in at 9:36 p.m. and an email from Deputy Limkeen at 4:30 p.m. Wednesday. She opened the email form Detective Moody first, and it had 2 attached videos and some attached reports in PDF format. She watched the videos first, and the first showed an arm quickly pouring something out of a vial onto the grill on the hood of a vehicle. The second video showed a black Dodge swerving in the street to get around traffic and a gunman in a mask firing his pistol twice while hanging out the window. She read the reports, and they described what was on the videos. She then opened the email from Deputy Limkeen, and it was a link to a press report posted on their website. It basically said that Cindy Lewis, Stephane Malot, and Tina Spotted Horse were found alive and in good health after being held captive at a house in Slaughterville, Oklahoma. It also said that Jeff Carrico was found at the house and was shot and killed when he fired a gun at the deputies. It said that any information as to the whereabouts of Ethan Carrico and Richard Nergal should be reported to the sheriff's office, and it gave the number to call. There were 2 photos of the inside of the house where the victims were being held. One showed a room with 6 beds, 3 on either side of the room with chains hanging down from large metal loops on the wall. And the other photo showed a painting of an Assyrian god hanging on a wall in the front room of the house. Susan still had an hour to investigate this case. She searched in a database of known addresses for each of the 3 women that were kidnapped. She found addresses and phone numbers for the 3 women. First, she called Tina Spotted Horse, and the number was disconnected. Then she called Stephane Malot and spoke to her mother, who said she did not know where Stephane was. She then called Cindy Lewis, and Cindy's mother answered. She said Cindy was not at home. She explained that she was a private investigator trying to find the men who had kidnapped her daughter, and her mother gave her a phone number but said she was not answering when her mother called. Susan called the number, and it went to voicemail, so she left a message saying she was a private investigator looking for the men that kidnapped her. She had about 30 minutes left to work on the case and started putting the report in order in a folder when her phone rang. She started a recorder and put the phone on speaker. It was Cindy Lewis. Susan explained again who she was and asked if she could ask some questions about the men that held her hostage. Cindy started talking and the floodgates opened. She said she was the first victim that they kidnapped. She got in her car to drive and passed out. As she regained consciousness, they had handcuffed her hands behind her back and were tying her legs. She was gagged and had a hood placed over her head. She never saw the men's faces as they always wore black masks with a skull printed on them. They were dressed in long pants and long sleeves, all black. She was there for over 2 months but lost track of time. At first she could not tell how many men there were. She was chained to the wall by a long chain that was locked around her neck. She had a bucket for a toilet and a small bed to sleep on. She was fed mostly white bread and water. She was there a long time before another young woman was locked up with her on a separate bed but with a chain around her neck. About a week or so later, another young woman joined them. By that time, she knew there were 3 men by the sound of their voices. She said they were never sexually assaulted. One of the other young women even tried flirting with them to try and curry favor but was shot down in that endeavor. She could hear them talking through the steel door, and they were planning on getting 6 women for a ritual. They constantly talked about keeping them pure because Nergal would want them fresh. She thought it was a death cult of some kind because they would talk about the return of Nergal. She then said, "That is all I know, and I don't want to talk about it anymore." Susan said she had been very helpful and that she was going to find the 2 men that got away and said goodbye. She hung up the phone. She checked the recording, and you could hear Cindy clearly. She burned a copy of the phone conversation on a compact disc that could be played on a computer. It was 9:20 a.m. She had gone over on her time, but the call, she thought, was important. She put the report in a folder and checked to see if Catherine was busy. Catherine said that she was ready to review the report and told her to please stay to answer any questions. She began reading the report. She silently read the whole thing and listened to the recording of Cindy and watched the videos from David's GoPro. It took her about 40 minutes. Then she said that she knew she had seen the man in the video capture before. He was an agent at the Los Angeles FBI Bureau who had to retire early when they found out he was in a death cult. She looked at the printout of the photo taken from the house that the women hostages were in that showed the painting of the Assyrian god. She then got on her computer and did a search on one of the special databases. She found what she was looking for and printed it out. It was testimony from an informant who had been murdered before he could testify. All they had on him were reports of what officers had heard him say. The report said that he was in a cult called the Order of Nergal, whose members were not allowed to drink or do drugs. The informant had developed a crack cocaine habit and said they were trying to kill him. He told them that the cult believed they could bring back Nergal to the earth through a human sacrifice that took 6 purified women and ritually killed them. He was set to give the names of the cult members when he was found dead in his hotel room. The room next to him had been tamped with, and the secrets of the cult had died with him. Catherine printed out this report and added it to the folder. She said, "It looks like David Madure and Helene Crofton have fallen afoul of the Order of Nergal. Let's help them nail these Nergal sons of bitches." Catherine then called Helene and told her that her report was ready. Helene dropped what she was doing and rushed over to the US 183Y where Nolan Investigations was located. She was there in less than 20 minutes. She checked the directory at the front of the building and found the suite number. She went inside their offices and went to the receptionist's desk and told the receptionist that she was Helene Crofton and was there to pick up her report. The receptionist asked for ID, and Helene presented her driver's license. The receptionist then went to a locked filing cabinet behind her and opened it with a key. She pulled out a blue folder that had Nolan Investigations written on the cover. She handed Helene the folder and said that if she had any questions, she could call the number on the first page of the report. She said that that was the number of her investigator. Helene rushed home and read the report. The report was detailed, and it took her about 45 minutes to go through it all. She became concerned for her and David's safety. That night, she called David about 7 p.m., and he was in his hotel room. She said she had gotten the report from Nolan Investigations. She expressed her concern for her safety. David suggested she too should carry a gun. She was concerned that she did not know much about firearms. David suggested that she should go to Rock Island Armory and inquire about a hammerless revolver. He told her to not get a Magnum and suggested a .38 Special. The next day was Friday. She went first thing in the morning to Rock Island Armory when they opened. She told the sales clerk that her husband had suggested a hammerless revolver in .38 Special for self-protection. He showed her a few models of hammerless .38 Special revolvers, and she decided on the Smith & Wesson 442 because it had a built-in laser sight on the handguard that activated when you grabbed the grip of the pistol. She said she had shot a pistol when she was younger with her father, but that she did not know much about them. The sales clerk said they had classes for first-time gun owners. She asked when the next available class was, and he said this Saturday morning. So she bought the revolver, a Kydex waistband holster, a box of 50 .38 Special bullets, and signed up for the class on Saturday. Helene went home and was still worried. She had always had a dog, but her blue heeler named Augie had passed away from old age about a year ago. She went online and found a place in Tyler, Texas called Kichai's Canines that had fully trained guard dogs. She looked at the available dogs on their website and found a beautiful Belgian Malinois named Bear for sale. She called the phone number listed and talked to the owner and lead trainer Lisa Kintz. She asked about Bear and found out that he was available. She made an appointment to meet Bear the next day in the afternoon at 3 p.m. in Tyler, Texas at 25 Clayton Lane. Bear would cost $50,000. She decided right then that she had to get Bear. She called her bank and checked the balance on her savings account. She had $298 in one of her savings accounts. This was money she had mostly earned on her last job building a power plant in Toledo. She had $50,000 transferred to her checking account and told the bank that she would be making a large purchase on Saturday on her debit card. David would just have to understand. David had driven directly home from work at Washington on the Brazos and got there at 6:55 p.m. Helene was so glad to see him that she was talking fast. David had to slow her down so that he could understand. Helene took a breath and said, "I got a gun. It is a hammerless .38 Special revolver like you said. It has a laser sight built into the grip. I am taking a class at the gun store tomorrow morning. But the main thing I want to do is go get a dog from Temple, Texas tomorrow afternoon at 3:00 p.m. She went on to say, "The report had me really concerned, and I found a guard dog online at Kichai's Canines in Temple. Come here, I will show you." She took him to her computer and showed him the website with a picture of the Belgian Malinois named Bear. She said that he is expensive, but she had the money and had already planned with the bank to make a large purchase with her debit card on Saturday. David asked, "How much exactly?" Helene told him the price, and David was skeptical. Then she let him read the report. David pored over the report for over an hour. After he was done, he said, "Let's go get your dog tomorrow." The next day, Saturday, Helene and David went to Rock Island Armory together. Helene took her class where she learned the proper way to load, carry, and shoot her pistol. He even showed her how to sight the laser by aligning it with the gun sights, so that when she looked through the sights, the red dot was aligned with the sight picture. David used the opportunity to practice shooting his .380 Sig Sauer on their gun range. After they were done at Rock Island Armory, they went and had lunch at La Barbec, and then they headed to Tyler to go to Kichai's Canines on 25 Clayton Lane. On the way, Helene called and said that they would be early, and Lisa, the owner, said that that was no problem. They arrived a little before 1 p.m. That afternoon, Lisa Kintz met them outside when they pulled up. Lisa introduced herself to them. She had a German accent and was about the same age as David and Helene. Helene introduced herself and David. Helene was nervous that the dog would not like her. She was reassured when Lisa asked who the dog's primary guardian would be, and Helene said that the dog was for her, and she responded that Bear did better with female handlers as Lisa was the one who trained him. She invited them into her house, and as they walked through, she gave Helene a card with all the commands that Bear knew. Lisa told Helene that the dog was trained with German commands, and the list had the English command next to the German command with a phonetic pronunciation guide next to the German words. Lisa said that it was better to have the dog trained in German so that English-speaking strangers cannot try to command the dog. They made it through Lisa's house and came to an air-conditioned large kennel room. Bear was in one of the kennels, and Lisa opened the door to it and said, "Air." Bear came out to Lisa. Then she said, "Fuss." and Bear sat down beside her. Bear was black and brown like Belgian Malinois are, but he had an all-black face that was darker than other Belgian Malinois, except for a hint of brown eyebrow patches giving him a unique look. Helene was in love with him when she saw him. Lisa then told Helene to try. Helene said, "Fuss," and Bear came over and sat down beside Helene. Bear was serious. He did not wag his tail, but Lisa could tell that he liked Helene. They spent about an hour going over the commands and putting Helene and Bear through their paces together. Lisa would not let a dog like Bear go to an owner that was a bad fit, but Bear took to Helene right away. After an hour together, Lisa was comfortable with selling Bear to Helene. Lisa asked if Helene wanted Bear and reminded her that he was $50,000. Helene said that she did, and asked if they could try and get her debit card to go through. Lisa had a card reader attachment for her phone and gave it a try. She swiped the card through the reader attachment and typed in 50,000, and it took it a minute, but it said approved. Lisa then went on her banking app and confirmed that the money was in her account. Bear now had a new home with Helene. Lisa spent the rest of the afternoon going over the German commands that were on the card and working with Helene and Bear. She gave Helene a ball and taught her how to use it as Bear's reward. Bear was serious about that ball. Bear responded well to Helene. Lisa could tell that Bear really liked Helene a lot. Bear had a thing for ladies, and Lisa was glad he was going to a woman. David and Helene went with Bear to David's truck. David opened the door and Helene said, "Hop," and Bear jumped right in. They drove home and arrived after about 40 minutes on the road. Helene got out with Bear and introduced him to the renters in the guest house. Bear was serious but friendly with them. David then drove to PetSmart and got Bear some of the food Lisa had suggested. A rope with 2 knots that was a chew toy, and a few balls like the one Lisa sent with Bear. It took about an hour before David returned. Helene said that she always wanted Bear close to her, so David took Augie's old kennel crate and bed out of the storage room and set them up in David's and Helene's bedroom. Bear would stay in their room at night. Helene's job was such that she worked a few months and was off a few months as new projects were completed and then came up. She was off work for the near future and could spend time with Bear. David suggested that Helene get a license to carry permit just to be safe. Helene agreed and made an appointment over the phone to take the LTC class at Rock Island Armory the next Thursday. David did not tell Helene about the dream where Nick warned him of the future attack on Monday. He did not know what to think about it, and it sounded crazy to talk about. David had remained tight-lipped about the curse because he did not want to look mentally unstable. He just reported the tangible evidence of the things that happened to him.